My name is Deborah Hall. I'm 30 years old, a senior architect at one of Boston's most prestigious firms, and I'm about to tell you the most devastating story of my life. A story about the night my parents drugged me, shaved my head, and tried to destroy me on the eve of my wedding. But here's what they didn't know. When I woke up that morning and stumbled downstairs at dawn, I found them on their knees, not praying, not begging for forgiveness, but frantically searching for something they'd lost. The security camera footage, the footage they didn't know I'd already downloaded hours before.
I woke up on my wedding morning completely bald, with chemical burns searing across my scalp. My hands shook as I touched the raw, tender skin where my chestnut hair had been just hours ago. The woman staring back at me in the bathroom mirror was unrecognizable. But as I stood there, trying to process the violation, I heard frantic voices downstairs. My parents, panicking. And that's when I realized something that changed everything. They had no idea what was coming. Tell me in the comments, have you ever watched your family's perfect image crumble in real time? Because that's exactly what I was about to do. Let me back up and tell you who I am and how I got here. I grew up in a beautiful estate in rural Vermont, the kind of place that looks like a postcard. White columns, perfectly manicured gardens, and a family that everyone in town admired. The Halls were Vermont royalty. My father, Richard, was a partner at the state's largest accounting firm. My mother, Patricia, sat on every charity board that mattered. And my younger sister, Vanessa, was the golden child who could do absolutely no wrong. Me? I was the invisible daughter, the one who got straight A's but never quite measured up.
The one who worked 3 jobs to put myself through college, while my parents paid for Vanessa's luxury apartment near campus. The one who spent 30 years trying to earn love that was never going to come. I became an architect because I wanted to build something solid, something real, something that couldn't be taken away or rewritten by my family's version of reality. 6 months ago, I got engaged to James Mitchell, a civil rights attorney who actually saw me, really saw me. He came from a modest family in Maine, the kind of people who showed love through actions instead of bank accounts. When I brought him home to meet my parents, I watched my mother's smile tighten. He wasn't from money, he wasn't connected. He was everything my family looked down on, and everything I needed.
The wedding planning became a nightmare. Every decision I made, my mother undermined. Every tradition I wanted to skip, she insisted was mandatory. But the worst part wasn't my mother's controlling behavior. It was watching my sister Vanessa spiral. 3 months before my wedding, her fiancé broke up with her. She quit her marketing job, maxed out 4 credit cards, and moved back into my parents' house. And suddenly, everything became about protecting Vanessa's fragile ego. 2 weeks ago, Aunt Maggie pulled me aside at a family dinner. Margaret Chen, my father's older sister, had married a Chinese-American professor 40 years ago and been quietly estranged from the family ever since.
But she never stopped watching. She never stopped documenting. And that night, she whispered something that made my blood run cold. Your parents are planning something, Deborah. I don't know what yet, but I've been recording everything. Trust me when the time comes. The night before my wedding, my parents insisted I stay at the family estate. One last night as a Hall before you become a Mitchell, my mother said with that brittle smile. Just family tradition, sweetheart. I should have known better.
I should have seen the signs, but I was exhausted from months of battles, and I wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could love me properly for one night. That evening, my mother brought me tea in my childhood bedroom. Chamomile with honey, she said, to help you sleep before your big day. I should have noticed how her hands trembled as she handed me the cup. I should have seen the way my father lurked in the doorway, watching. But I was so desperate for motherly affection that I drank it, every drop. And that's when my world shattered forever. But they had no idea what was coming next, because I had been learning from Aunt Maggie, and I was always 3 steps ahead. The pattern started when I was young, so young that I thought it was normal for a long time. When I was 8 years old, I won the regional youth art competition. My watercolor painting of our family garden took first place out of 300 entries. The prize was a $1,000 scholarship and a feature in the local newspaper. I remember running home with the ribbon, so excited to share the news with my parents. I burst through the front door calling for them, and found my mother in the living room with Vanessa, who was only 4 years old at the time. "Mom, I won," I shouted, waving the blue ribbon. "I won first place in the whole region." My mother glanced at me briefly before turning back to Vanessa, who was having a tantrum about wanting ice cream before dinner. "That's nice, dear," she said absently, "but can you keep your voice down? Your sister is having a difficult moment and needs my full attention." The newspaper came to our house the following week to take photos and interview our family. My mother insisted that Vanessa be in every shot, positioning her front and center. The article that ran barely mentioned my name. When I turned 16, everything I had worked for culminated in a full academic scholarship to MIT. Full ride, everything covered. One of only 12 students nationwide to receive it that year. I had spent years studying, volunteering, building the perfect application while working part-time at the local library. The acceptance letter arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. I was shaking as I opened it, hardly believing the words on the page. I ran to find my parents, letter clutched in my hand, ready to share the most important achievement of my young life. I found them in the driveway, surrounding Vanessa with cameras and balloons. She had just gotten her driver's license. That same day. My parents had bought her a brand new white Lexus with a giant red bow on the hood. Neighbors were gathering to take pictures. My mother was posting photos to Facebook in real time, captions gushing about how proud she was of her baby girl reaching this milestone. I stood at the edge of the driveway, holding my MIT letter, and watched my future be eclipsed by Vanessa's driving test. I tried to interrupt. "Dad, I got into MIT. Full scholarship." My father barely glanced at me. "That's great, Debbie," he said, using the nickname I hated. "We'll talk about it at dinner." But dinner that night was entirely focused on Vanessa's new car. What color should she get for the custom interior? What personalized license plate she wanted? Whether she needed the premium sound system or the ultra premium. My MIT acceptance was mentioned once, briefly, when my father said, "At least we won't have to pay for your college," which is good because Vanessa's car payments are going to be significant. The financial abuse started early, but I didn't recognize it as abuse until much later. When I was 24, I learned that my parents were 3 months behind on their mortgage. The estate they lived in, the one they used to project wealth and status, was about to be foreclosed on. My father had made some bad investments. My mother had been spending beyond their means for years. I had just gotten my first real paycheck from my architecture firm, and I made a decision I would regret for years. I took out a personal loan and paid off their mortgage arrears, $60,000. It took me 3 years to pay back that loan, working overtime, skipping meals, living in a studio apartment the size of a closet. My parents never thanked me publicly, but they did add Vanessa's name to the property deed shortly after, making sure she would inherit the house I had saved. When I asked about it, my father explained that it was only fair since I was established in my career and Vanessa needed security. By the time I turned 28, I had been promoted to senior architect. I was the youngest person in my firm's history to reach that level. I had designed 3 award-winning buildings and had been featured in Architectural Digest. My parents missed my celebration dinner because they had to attend Vanessa's engagement party. Her first engagement party. To a man she had been dating for 6 weeks. The party cost $40,000. My parents paid for every cent. When I mentioned my promotion the next time I saw them, my mother said, "That's wonderful, dear. But don't forget that career success isn't everything. Vanessa has found something much more important: love." Vanessa's engagement lasted 4 months before her fiancé discovered she had been cheating on him with 3 different men. The breakup was spectacular and public, splashed across social media for everyone to see. My parents immediately went into crisis mode. They paid off the ex-fiancé to keep quiet.
They took Vanessa on a luxury vacation to help her heal. They set her up with a therapist who cost $500 per session. And when Vanessa returned home, she quit her marketing job, citing emotional trauma and the need for family support. That was 9 months ago. In those 9 months, Vanessa had maxed out 4 credit cards pursuing what she called her healing journey: spa treatments, designer clothes, luxury hotel staycations, and a series of online courses, promising to help her find her authentic self. The total damage was $60,000. When the credit card companies started calling, my parents quietly refinanced the house. I had saved and paid off every cent of Vanessa's debt without telling her she needed to change her behavior. Then I announced my engagement to James. I thought, naively, that my parents might be happy for me.
That they might celebrate my happiness the way they had tried to celebrate Vanessa's failed engagement. Instead, my mother's first question was, "Does he come from money?" When I explained that James was a civil rights attorney from a working-class family, I watched her face fall. She actually looked disappointed that I had found someone who loved me. The week after my engagement announcement, Vanessa's second fiancé broke up with her. This time, the timing felt suspicious. This time, I wondered if Vanessa had sabotaged her own relationship because she couldn't stand the idea of me being happy while she was alone. My parents went into overdrive protecting her again. More therapy, more luxury healing purchases.
More everything always being about Vanessa's pain and Vanessa's needs and Vanessa's fragile mental state. 2 weeks before my wedding, I discovered something that changed everything. I was helping my mother with some wedding paperwork when I saw an email on her open laptop. It was from Vanessa to my mother. The subject line read, "I can't let her have this." The email detailed Vanessa's plan to intercept my wedding correspondence and make changes without my knowledge. She had been the one who changed my floral arrangements. She had been the one who altered my seating chart. She had been the one sabotaging my wedding planning for months, and my mother had known about it the entire time. When I confronted my mother, she actually defended Vanessa's actions. "She's been through so much, Deborah," my mother said. "Can't you just be understanding? Can't you just let her feel included in your special day? This is hard for her, watching you succeed when she's struggling." The gaslighting was so smooth, so practiced, that for a moment I almost apologized for being angry. 1 week before the wedding, Aunt Maggie called me at midnight. Her voice was urgent. "Deborah, I need you to listen carefully. I've been recording your family gatherings for 5 years. Ever since your 25th birthday, when I watched them erase your achievements again."
I have documentation of everything: financial records, conversations, emails I shouldn't have access to but managed to get anyway. I've been building a case because I knew eventually they would go too far. I think that time is coming. She told me about the hidden cameras she had installed around the estate during a family gathering 2 years ago. Tiny devices that looked like smoke detectors and outlets, recording everything that happened in the common areas. She told me about the financial investigation her husband, a forensic accountant, had been quietly conducting into my parents' handling of my grandmother's estate. And she told me something that made me go cold. Deborah, your grandmother left everything to you. Her entire estate.
$2.3 million. Your parents forged documents to gain access to it when you turned 21. They've been stealing from you for 9 years. The night before my wedding, I drove to the family estate with this knowledge burning inside me. James wanted to come with me, but I told him to stay in Boston. I needed to face this alone, or at least I needed my family to think I was alone. What I didn't tell James was that Aunt Maggie, Father O'Brien from our family's church, and Nina Rodriguez, my college roommate who happened to be a professional videographer, were all positioned nearby, waiting for my signal. I arrived at 7 in the evening. Vanessa's car was in the driveway, which surprised me. She wasn't supposed to be there.
This was supposed to be just my parents and me. One last quiet evening before the chaos of the wedding. But when I walked inside, I found all 3 of them in the living room, and the energy was wrong. My mother's smile was too tight. My father wouldn't meet my eyes. And Vanessa looked triumphant in a way that made my skin crawl. Dinner was tense. My mother kept pushing food on my plate, encouraging me to eat more, relax more, not worry so much about tomorrow. My father made several comments about how James seemed like a nice enough man, but perhaps was punching above his weight class by marrying into our family. And Vanessa kept staring at me with this strange expression, like she was memorizing my face for some reason I couldn't understand. At 10:30, my mother brought the tea. It was in my grandmother's china cup, the one I had always loved as a child. "Chamomile with honey," she said, "and a little something special to help you sleep. You need to be well rested for tomorrow." I should have known, but I was so tired from months of fighting, so desperate for one moment of motherly care, that I took the cup and drank. The sedative hit fast. Within 10 minutes, my vision was blurring. Within 15, I couldn't stand without swaying. I tried to speak, to ask what was happening, but my words came out slurred and wrong. That's when I heard Vanessa's voice, sharp and clear through the drugged haze. "Do it now, or I'm gone forever. I swear to God, if you don't do this, I will walk out of this house tonight and you will never see me again. She gets everything. She always gets everything. You owe me this." Through my fading consciousness, I heard my mother crying. "Not here, Richard. Not like this." But my father's voice was cold, practical. "We document it. We make it look like she did this to herself. A breakdown. The pressure of the wedding. Everyone will understand. And then we'll postpone things, get her help, and by the time she comes out, everyone will have forgotten, and Vanessa can have her moment." The last thing I remember before everything went black was the sound of electric clippers buzzing to life and my mother's shaking hands touching my hair. I woke up at 5 in the morning to pain, searing, burning pain across my scalp that felt like someone had taken a blowtorch to my head. My mouth tasted like metal and cotton, and my body felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. For a moment, I couldn't remember where I was or what had happened. Then I tried to touch my head, and my fingers met bare skin and chemical burns instead of hair. The memories came flooding back in fragments. The tea. Vanessa's ultimatum. The sound of clippers. My mother crying while my father filmed. I forced myself to sit up, fighting waves of nausea from whatever they had put in my system. My childhood bedroom looked exactly the same as always. Pale yellow walls, white furniture, photographs of a happy family that had never actually existed. Except now, there was hair everywhere. My hair, dark chestnut strands scattered across the hardwood floor like evidence of a crime scene. I stumbled to the bathroom and flipped on the light. The woman in the mirror was unrecognizable. My head had been shaved completely bald, but that wasn't the worst of it. There were patches of redness and blistering across my scalp. They had applied something after shaving me, something caustic that had burned my skin. And on the bathroom counter, staged carefully, was a collection of pills scattered around an empty bottle, and a note written in handwriting that looked remarkably like mine. I picked up the note with shaking hands. I can't do this anymore. The pressure of the wedding, of being perfect, of never measuring up. I just wanted to disappear for a while. I'm sorry. Mom, Dad, please cancel the wedding and tell everyone I'm not well. I need help. The forgery was good. Very good. They had clearly practiced. But I knew my own handwriting well enough to see the subtle differences. The way the tail on my letter Y was slightly wrong, the spacing between words that I would never use. My phone was on the nightstand, and when I grabbed it, I saw dozens of missed calls and text messages. Most were from James, increasingly frantic as the night went on, and I didn't respond. But there were also messages from my parents, time-stamped at 3 in the morning, sent to my emergency contacts. Our daughter has had a mental health crisis. We're postponing the wedding indefinitely. Please respect our family's privacy during this difficult time. They had already told everyone. The wedding was supposed to start at 2 in the afternoon, less than 9 hours away, and they had already canceled it without my knowledge or consent. 200 guests who had traveled from across the country, a venue that had been paid for, a marriage license that had been filed. All of it dismantled while I was unconscious upstairs, drugged and mutilated by my own family. I heard voices downstairs. Angry, panicked voices. I crept to my bedroom door and opened it just enough to listen. My father was speaking, his voice tight with stress. It's not in the cloud backup. I checked 3 times. Are you sure you deleted it? My mother's voice, higher pitched than usual with fear. I told you I deleted it from the system. I watched it disappear from the app. How is it not gone? And then Vanessa, sounding more worried than I had ever heard her. What if she wakes up and sees what we did? What if she calls the police? You said this would work. You promised me this would work. My father's response was cold. She won't call the police. Look at how that note is written. Look at the scene we staged. If she goes to anyone, we show them the evidence of her breakdown, and everyone will think she's unstable. She'll be the daughter who couldn't handle the pressure and had a psychotic episode. No one will believe her over us. I stood there in my doorway, listening to my parents discuss how they had framed me for my own assault, and something inside me shifted. The part of me that had spent 30 years seeking their approval, trying to earn their love, desperate to be seen and valued, that part died in that moment. What replaced it was something colder, something more calculating, something that remembered Aunt Maggie's words about being 3 steps ahead. I pulled out my phone and opened a text thread I had created the week before. It included Aunt Maggie, James, Father O'Brien, and Nina. I had labeled it Operation Daylight. I typed 3 words: activate everything now. Then I took photographs of my scalp from every angle, documenting the burns and the complete destruction of my hair. I photographed the staged pill bottles and the forged note. I photographed the hair scattered across my floor. Evidence, documentation, truth. Within minutes, responses started coming through. Aunt Maggie sent a message. Footage downloaded and backed up. Already shared with my attorney. Police have been notified. James sent one that made my eyes burn with tears. I'm 5 minutes away. Father O'Brien is with me. We're coming in. Nina's message was simple. Camera ready. Let's burn it all down. I looked at myself in the mirror one more time. I looked like a victim. I looked like someone who had been brutalized by the people who were supposed to protect her. But I was going to make sure that when people saw me today, they didn't see weakness. They would see exactly what my family had done. I pulled my wedding dress from the closet where it hung in a protective bag. White silk, simple and elegant, with a cathedral-length veil made of the finest tulle. My mother had insisted on the dramatic veil, saying it would create stunning photographs. She had no idea how right she was. I put on the dress carefully, every movement sending sharp pains through my burned scalp. Then I arranged the veil so that instead of concealing my condition, it showcased it. The sheer fabric caught the early morning light, creating an almost ethereal effect around my bald, burned head. I looked like a warrior. I looked like someone who had survived something terrible and was about to make sure everyone knew exactly what had happened. Downstairs, I could still hear my parents searching frantically for something, and then it hit me what they were looking for. The security footage that would prove what they had done. They thought they had deleted it from the system, but Aunt Maggie's hidden cameras were on a completely separate network, one they didn't know existed. They were searching for evidence they thought was gone, evidence that was actually already in the hands of the police and my attorney. I checked my phone one more time and saw a message from Aunt Maggie. Father's phone. Check the nightstand in their bedroom. He filmed the whole thing on his personal device. He wanted proof that you did this to yourself, but he hasn't uploaded it anywhere yet. If you can get that phone, we have everything we need, in his own words. My parents' bedroom was at the end of the hall. I could hear them still downstairs, tearing apart the living room looking for phantom security footage. I moved quietly down the hallway, my bare feet silent on the hardwood floors. Their bedroom door was open, and morning light streamed through the windows. On my father's nightstand, next to his reading glasses and a stack of financial magazines, was his phone. I grabbed it and turned it on. No passcode. My father was arrogant enough to believe he didn't need one in his own home. I opened his photo gallery and found exactly what Aunt Maggie had promised: a video file, filmed last night, showing everything. My mother's hands shaking as she held the clippers. My father directing her. Cut more on the left side. Make it even. We need this to look self-inflicted. And worst of all, the moment after they finished, when my father poured something from an unmarked bottle onto my scalp, and I convulsed in my drugged sleep as the chemicals burned my skin. His voice on the video, calm and clinical. The burns will make it more convincing. Make it look like she was trying to use chemicals to destroy evidence of what she'd done to herself. Everything points to a breakdown. I downloaded the video to my phone, uploaded it to 3 separate cloud services, and sent copies to Aunt Maggie, James, and my attorney. Then I put my father's phone back exactly where I had found it and walked back to my room. 6 o'clock in the morning. James would be here in minutes with Father O'Brien. Nina was probably already positioning cameras outside. Aunt Maggie was coordinating with the police. And my parents were downstairs, still searching for evidence they would never find, completely unaware that their perfect plan had already fallen apart. I looked at myself one more time in the mirror. The bald, burned woman in the wedding dress. The daughter who had finally seen her family clearly. I walked downstairs. It was time for them to see me clearly, too. Time to show them what they had created. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 6 times as I descended the stairs, each step measured and deliberate despite the pain radiating through my body. I held the banister with my left hand, while my right kept the cathedral veil positioned precisely where I wanted it, showcasing rather than concealing the destruction they had wrought. My wedding dress rustled softly with each step, a sound like whispered promises of justice. My parents were on their hands and knees in the living room when I reached the bottom of the stairs, surrounded by couch cushions they had torn apart and furniture they had moved away from the walls. They were so focused on their frantic search that they didn't hear me at first. My mother's silk robe was dirty from crawling across the floor, her perfect hair disheveled. My father had removed his jacket, his dress shirt untucked and stained with sweat. They looked desperate, panicked, nothing like the composed, respectable people they presented to the world. I cleared my throat, and they froze. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the ticking of that grandfather clock counting down the seconds until their world imploded. My mother was the first to turn around, still on her knees, and when she saw me standing there in my wedding dress, her face went completely white. The cup she had been holding, presumably searching behind it for some trace of the footage they thought they had deleted, slipped from her fingers and shattered against the hardwood floor. "Deborah," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You're awake. You shouldn't be awake yet." My father stood slowly, his expression cycling through shock, fear, and then settling on something that looked like anger. The anger of a man who realizes his carefully constructed plan is falling apart. "What are you doing in that dress?" he demanded, trying to reclaim authority through volume. "You need to get back upstairs. You're not well. You had an episode last night, and you need professional help." I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I took several steps forward until I stood at the edge of the living room, backlit by the morning sun streaming through the windows behind me. I wanted them to see me clearly, to see what they had done, to understand that I knew everything. "I had an episode," I repeated, my voice calm and cold. "Is that what we're calling it? When you drug your daughter's tea, shave her head while she's unconscious, and burn her scalp with chemicals to make it look like she mutilated herself? That's an episode?" My mother's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. But they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of fear. Fear of being caught. Fear of consequences. "Sweetheart, you're confused," she said, her voice taking on that saccharine tone she used when trying to manipulate situations. "You don't remember clearly. The sedative we gave you was for your own good. You were having a breakdown, threatening to hurt yourself, and we had to sedate you to keep you safe." "Really?" I pulled my phone from the small pocket sewn into my wedding dress. "Is that what your security footage shows?" "Oh, wait, you deleted that, didn't you? Or at least you think you did. But here's the thing, Mother. There were other cameras. Cameras you didn't know about. Cameras that recorded everything." The color drained from both of their faces simultaneously. My father took a step toward me, his hand outstretched as if to grab my phone, but I moved back quickly. "Don't," I said sharply. "Don't you dare touch me again." That's when the doorbell rang. Not a polite, single chime, but an insistent series of rings that echoed through the house like an alarm. My mother looked at my father with wild eyes. "Who is that?" "We told everyone we needed privacy." "That," I said, moving toward the front door, "would be the people who actually love me. Unlike you." I opened the door to find exactly who I expected. James stood on the front step, still dressed in the clothes he'd worn the night before, his face etched with worry and rage. Beside him was Father O'Brien, our family's priest for the last 20 years, wearing his clerical collar and an expression of profound disappointment. Behind them was Aunt Maggie, looking grimly satisfied, and Nina with a professional camera already recording. "May we come in?" Father O'Brien asked, though it wasn't really a question. I stepped aside, and they entered like a delegation of truth arriving to dismantle a kingdom built on lies. My parents stood frozen in the living room as our visitors filed in, Nina's camera capturing every moment, every reaction, every micro-expression of guilt and fear that flickered across their faces. James reached me first, his hands gentle as they cupped my face, his eyes scanning the damage with a fury I had never seen in him before. "I'm going to destroy them," he whispered. "I'm going to use every legal tool I have to destroy them." "I know," I whispered back. "But first, let them destroy themselves." Aunt Maggie moved to the center of the room, pulling out her tablet with the deliberate movements of someone who had been waiting for this moment for years. "Patricia, Richard," she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who no longer cared about family politics or social niceties. I think it's time we all watched what really happened last night. She tapped her screen, and suddenly the large television on the wall flickered to life. My parents' eyes went wide as they recognized their own living room on the screen, time stamped at 10:47 p.m. the previous night. The footage was crystal clear, shot from multiple angles, showing me accepting the cup of tea from my mother, drinking it, and then slowly succumbing to whatever they had put in it. The audio was even more damning. Vanessa's voice, sharp and demanding. "Do it now, or I'm gone forever. I swear to God, if you don't do this, I will walk out of this house tonight and you will never see me again. She gets everything. She always gets everything. You owe me this." My mother's protests, weak and ultimately meaningless. "Not here. Not like this." And my father's cold response. "We document it. We make it look like she did this to herself." The footage continued, showing them carrying me upstairs, my body limp and helpless. It showed my mother crying as she picked up the electric clippers. It showed my father filming on his phone while directing the assault. And worst of all, it showed the moment my father poured chemicals onto my scalp, and my unconscious body convulsed in response. "The burns will make it more convincing," my father's voice came through the speakers. "Make it look like she was trying to use chemicals to destroy evidence of what she'd done to herself." Aunt Maggie paused the video as my father appeared on screen, setting up the staged suicide scene with the pills and forged note. The silence in the room was deafening. My mother had collapsed onto the couch, sobbing into her hands. My father stood rigid, his jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscles twitching. "That's not all," Aunt Maggie continued, swiping to a new screen. "Let's talk about money, specifically about Deborah's grandmother's estate." She pulled up financial documents, spreadsheets, bank transfers, all meticulously documented. When Margaret Hall died 9 years ago, she left her entire estate to her eldest granddaughter, $2.3 million in cash and investments. But Deborah never saw a penny of it, did she? Because you two forged documents giving yourselves power of attorney over the estate. You've been stealing from your own daughter for nearly a decade. My father finally found his voice. That money was meant for the family, for everyone. Not just for one selfish daughter who thought she was better than the rest of us. Selfish? Father O'Brien spoke for the first time, his voice carrying a moral authority that made even my father flinch. "You drugged and assaulted your daughter on the eve of her wedding. You stole her inheritance. You've been systematically abusing her for 30 years, and you have the audacity to call her selfish? You don't understand," my mother wailed from the couch. "Vanessa needs us. She's fragile. She's always been sensitive, and Deborah is so strong, so independent. We thought Deborah could handle it." "I see," Aunt Maggie said coldly. "So because Deborah was strong, you decided to break her? Because she was independent, you decided to steal from her? Because she didn't demand your attention, you decided she didn't deserve it?" That's when Vanessa appeared at the top of the stairs, clearly having heard everything. She was still in her pajamas, her golden hair messy from sleep, her face pale as she took in the scene below. "What's going on?" she asked, though her eyes told me she knew exactly what was happening. "Come down here, Vanessa," I said, my voice steady despite the rage burning through my veins. "Come see what your ultimatum accomplished." She descended slowly, each step more hesitant than the last. When she reached the bottom, she couldn't meet my eyes. She stared instead at the frozen image on the television screen, showing our parents in the act of destroying me. "I didn't think they'd actually do it," she whispered. "I was angry. I said things. But I didn't think. You knew exactly what you were doing." I cut her off. "You threatened them with abandonment because you knew that was the one thing they feared more than anything. Losing you. Their golden child. Their perfect daughter. And you knew they would sacrifice me to keep you. You counted on it." Before she could respond, there was another knock at the door. Aunt Maggie opened it to reveal two police officers, a man and a woman, both with serious expressions. Behind them stood a woman in a business suit who I recognized as Jennifer Walsh, the attorney Aunt Maggie had mentioned. "Richard and Patricia Hall?" the female officer asked, stepping into the foyer. "We have some questions about events that occurred at this residence last night. We've received evidence of assault, illegal drugging, and false imprisonment." My father's face went from white to red. "This is ridiculous. This is our daughter. This is a family matter. You have no right to interfere." "Actually," Jennifer Walsh said, her voice crisp and professional, "when a family matter involves felony assault and fraud totaling over $2 million, it becomes a legal matter. My client has provided extensive evidence, including video footage, financial records, and medical documentation of her injuries. You have the right to remain silent, though I suspect you'll want to consult your own attorney very quickly." My mother looked up from the couch, mascara running down her face in black rivers. "Deborah, please, we're your parents. You can't do this to us. Think of what this will do to our reputation. Think of the family name." That's when something inside me snapped. Not in an angry way, but in a freeing way, like chains falling off. "The family name?" I repeated. "The reputation you've spent 30 years building on my back? The image you created by erasing me at every turn? That reputation?" I walked closer to where she sat, my wedding dress trailing behind me like a ghost of what this day should have been. "You wanted me invisible, Mother. You wanted me silent. You wanted me to disappear so that Vanessa could shine brighter. Well, congratulations. You succeeded. The old Deborah, the one who kept trying to earn your love, she's gone. You killed her last night when you held those clippers. What's left is someone who will never, ever be silent again." I turned to the police officers. "I want to press charges. All of them. Assault, battery, illegal drugging, false imprisonment, fraud, theft, everything." My father dropped to his knees, actually dropped to his knees on the hardwood floor, his hands clasped together like he was praying. "Deborah, please. We'll give everything back. We'll make it right. Just don't do this. Please don't destroy our lives." The sight of him kneeling there, begging, should have given me satisfaction. Instead, I just felt empty. "You destroyed your own lives," I said quietly. "I'm just making sure everyone can see what you really are." Father O'Brien placed his hand on my shoulder, a gesture of support and blessing. "Sometimes," he said, his voice carrying through the room, "the most loving thing we can do is let the truth burn down everything built on lies. Only then can something real be built in its place." The police began reading my parents their rights as Aunt Maggie pulled me aside. "There's one more thing," she said quietly. "Your grandmother knew. Before she died, she knew what they were doing to you. She tried to protect you with the will, but she also left you something else. Letters. Dozens of them, written over the course of your childhood. She documented everything she saw. Every time they favored Vanessa. Every time they diminished you. Every time they chose her over you. She wanted you to know that someone saw you. Someone knew your worth." Tears finally came then, hot and fast, for the grandmother I had loved but never knew had loved me back with such fierce protectiveness. James wrapped his arms around me, careful not to touch my burned scalp, and I let myself break down for just a moment. When I looked up, my parents were being led toward the door in handcuffs. My mother was still crying, still protesting that this was all a misunderstanding, that families should protect each other, that I was destroying everything over a simple mistake. Vanessa stood frozen in the center of the room, watching her perfect world collapse around her. The morning sun streamed through the windows, illuminating everything with harsh, clear light. No shadows, no places to hide. Just truth. burning away decades of carefully constructed lies. And for the first time in my 30 years of life, I could finally breathe. The trial took place 6 months later in the Burlington County Courthouse, a building I had passed hundreds of times growing up without ever imagining I would testify against my own parents inside its walls. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence, security footage from multiple angles, my father's own video of the assault, narrated in his cold, clinical voice, financial records showing systematic theft over nearly a decade, medical reports documenting the chemical burns and the sedatives found in my system. My parents' attorney tried to paint it as a family misunderstanding that had gotten out of hand. He described me as an ungrateful daughter weaponizing the legal system against people who had sacrificed everything to raise me. He characterized my parents as imperfect but well-meaning individuals who had made a single terrible mistake under extreme pressure from their emotionally unstable younger daughter. But the jury saw through it. The video evidence was too clear. The financial fraud too extensive, the premeditation too obvious. After 3 hours of deliberation, they returned with guilty verdicts on all counts: assault and battery, illegal administration of controlled substances, false imprisonment, fraud, identity theft. The list went on. My mother sobbed openly as the verdicts were read. My father sat rigid in his chair, his face a mask of suppressed rage. The judge sentenced them each to 3 years in prison, with credit for time served. Additionally, they were ordered to pay full restitution of $2.3 million plus interest, totaling just over $2.9 million. Their house, the estate I had saved from foreclosure years ago, was seized to begin covering the debt. Vanessa was charged as an accessory after the fact for her role in planning and instigating the assault. Her attorney negotiated a plea deal: 2 years probation, 500 hours of community service, mandatory psychiatric treatment, and a permanent restraining order preventing her from contacting me. She was also ordered to testify against our parents, providing details about years of systematic favoritism and financial manipulation. The social consequences were even more devastating than the legal ones. The trial was covered extensively by local media, and when national news outlets picked up the story, it went viral. Video clips from security footage, carefully edited to remove the most graphic elements, were viewed over 15 million times across social media platforms. The comments sections filled with stories from other people who had been scapegoated by their own families, erased and diminished to protect a golden child. My parents' perfect reputation crumbled overnight. My father was terminated from his accounting firm within hours of the verdict. My mother was removed from every charity board she had served on. Their church, where they had been pillars of the community for decades, issued a formal statement condemning their actions and expressing support for victims of family abuse. Former friends deleted them from social media. Neighbors who had once envied their seemingly perfect life now crossed the street to avoid them. The house sold at auction 3 months after sentencing, purchased by a young family from California who had no idea about its history. I drove past it once after the sale and felt nothing. It was just a building. The people who had made it a house of horrors were gone, and it could be something else now. Something better. I used a portion of the recovered money to establish the Margaret Hall Foundation, named after my grandmother who had seen my worth even when my parents couldn't. The foundation provides financial assistance and legal support to adult children escaping abusive family dynamics. We help people document abuse, connect with attorneys, find therapists who understand family trauma, and rebuild their lives away from toxic relatives. The rest of the money went into investments that would ensure I never had to worry about financial security again. My grandmother had wanted me to be free, and now I finally was. Free from dependence on people who had never truly loved me. Free from the hope that maybe someday they would change. Free from the weight of seeking approval from individuals who were fundamentally incapable of giving it. James and I got married exactly 1 year after the assault, in a small ceremony on a beach in Maine, surrounded by the family we had chosen for ourselves. Aunt Maggie walked me down the aisle. Father O'Brien officiated. Nina filmed everything, but this time the footage was filled with genuine joy instead of forced smiles. My hair had grown back, about 4 inches of new growth that I wore natural and unstyled, a reminder of what I had survived and how far I had come. We wrote our own vows. When it was my turn to speak, I looked at James and said, "You saw me when I was invisible. You valued me when I felt worthless. You stood beside me when facing the truth meant losing everything I thought was family. You showed me what real love looks like, and I promise to spend the rest of my life showing you the same." There was an empty chair at our ceremony, positioned where traditionally the mother of the bride would sit. We filled it with white roses and a small sign that read, "Reserved for those who truly loved me." Next to it was a framed photograph of my grandmother, taken in her garden decades ago, smiling at the camera with the kind of joy that comes from living authentically. I received 3 letters from my mother during her first year in prison. Each one followed the same pattern: initial apologies that quickly devolved into justifications and ultimately blamed me for not being more understanding of how difficult Vanessa was to manage. Each letter made it clear that she still didn't grasp what she had done wrong, still saw herself as the victim of an ungrateful daughter who had destroyed the family over a single mistake. I read each letter once, documented it with my attorney, and then shredded it. I felt nothing. No anger. No sadness. No hope that maybe this time she would understand. Just a distant recognition that she was exactly who she had always been, and I had finally accepted that reality. My father never wrote. According to Aunt Maggie, who maintained minimal contact to handle estate matters, he spent his time in prison maintaining to anyone who would listen that I had always been jealous of Vanessa, that I had manufactured this entire situation to get revenge for perceived slights, that the video evidence had been manipulated. The denial was so complete, so absolute, that it became almost clinical, a case study in narcissistic personality disorder. Vanessa violated her restraining order twice in the first year, showing up at my office building once and at my home once. Both times the police were called, and both times her probation was extended. The second violation came with a warning that any further contact would result in jail time. After that, she disappeared from my life entirely. I heard through former mutual acquaintances that she had moved to Arizona, changed her name, and was working as a yoga instructor, telling people her family had died in a car accident. I let her have that story, let her rewrite history however she needed to in order to live with herself. I didn't need the truth to chase her. I had already spoken it loudly enough. 2 years after the trial, I was invited to speak at a conference on family abuse. Standing at that podium, looking out at hundreds of people who had experienced variations of what I had survived, I shared my story in full. I talked about the patterns that had started in childhood, the systematic favoritism, the financial manipulation, the way abusers groom their victims to believe that mistreatment is normal, that speaking up is betrayal, that family loyalty means accepting your own erasure. And I talked about the moment everything changed. Not the moment my parents assaulted me, but the moment I chose to stop seeking their approval and started seeking my own truth. They wanted to shave away my identity, I said, my voice carrying through the silent auditorium. They wanted to erase me to preserve their image. But identity isn't something that can be cut away with clippers or burned away with chemicals. It's something we build ourselves, from the truth of who we are and who we choose to become. The speech was recorded and later went viral, viewed over 5 million times. My inbox flooded with messages from people sharing their own stories of family scapegoating, golden child dynamics, and the painful process of choosing freedom over dysfunction. I couldn't respond to every message, but I read them all. Each one was a reminder that speaking truth, no matter how painful, creates space for others to speak theirs. 3 years after the assault on my 33rd birthday, James and I hosted a small dinner party at our home in Boston. The guest list included Aunt Maggie and her husband, Father O'Brien, Nina and her partner, and several colleagues who had become genuine friends. We toasted with my grandmother's crystal glasses, recovered from the estate sale, and I looked around the table at these people who had chosen to love me without conditions or manipulations. To chosen family, Aunt Maggie said, raising her glass. The people who see us, value us, and stand beside us when facing the truth costs everything. To chosen family, we all echoed, and the sound of crystal chiming together felt like a benediction, a blessing on the life I had built from the ashes of the one that had tried to consume me. Later that night, after our guests had left, James and I sat on our balcony watching the city lights sparkle below. He took my hand, running his thumb over my knuckles in the familiar gesture that had become our shorthand for, "I'm here, you're safe." "Do you ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "Pressing charges, testifying, all of it." I thought about the question seriously, looking back over 3 years of legal battles, media attention, painful revelations, and permanent family fracture. I thought about the life I might have had if I had stayed silent, accepted the abuse, maintained the facade. And I thought about the life I actually had now, built on truth, even when truth was terrifying. "No," I said finally. "Not for a single second. They stole 30 years of my life. I wasn't going to give them the rest." He squeezed my hand. "For what it's worth, I think your grandmother would be proud of you." "I know she would be," I said, and for the first time, I felt the truth of it in my bones. She saw me. She tried to protect me, and when she couldn't protect me anymore, she gave me the tools I needed to protect myself. That's real love. Not the performance my parents put on, but actual love that continues beyond death. The city lights blurred as my eyes filled with tears, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of gratitude for having survived, for having found the courage to speak, for having built something real from the wreckage of something false. My phone buzzed with a notification. Another message on the Foundation's website from someone seeking help escaping family abuse. I opened it and began typing a response, offering resources, sharing contact information for attorneys and therapists, letting this stranger know they weren't alone. Because that's what I had learned from all of this. The best revenge isn't living well, though I was doing that. The best revenge isn't watching abusers face consequences, though that helped. The best revenge is living truthfully and then teaching others that they deserve truth too. It's taking the weapon that was meant to silence you and transforming it into a megaphone for others who haven't found their voice yet. My parents had wanted to erase me. Instead, I had amplified myself and countless others in the process. They had wanted me invisible. Instead, I had become impossible to ignore. They had wanted to preserve their perfect image by destroying me. Instead, I had destroyed their image by simply telling the truth about who they really were. And in the end, that was the sweetest victory of all. Not revenge, not punishment, just truth, burning bright enough for everyone to see. Truth that freed me from their control. Truth that broke a generational cycle of abuse. Truth that transformed suffering into purpose. I finished typing my response to the stranger seeking help and hit send. Then I put my phone away and returned to the moment, to my husband's hand in mine, to the cool evening breeze, to the life I had built by refusing to stay silent. The night before my wedding, my parents drugged me and shaved my head. The next morning, they knelt, not in repentance, but in fear of consequences. But I didn't need their repentance anymore. I didn't need their apology or their understanding or their love. I had found all of those things in places they could never touch or taint or steal. I had found them in myself, and that was the ending they never saw coming. If this story resonated with you, please share it with someone who needs to hear that they are not alone. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and your own truth? Tell me your story in the comments below. And remember, when they try to shave away your identity, grow back even stronger. You are not invisible, you never were.